Yo, what's up guys? With the hype around Borderlands 4 and with Harlowe actually being announced and we can actually see what she does, I wanted to get in on the planner and talk about a build that I'm thinking about running. So this is only possible because of maxroll.gg. They have a Borderlands 4 planner for all the different characters. You can go through and choose a character and then plan out a build for them. It's really sweet. It's still work in progress. Like there's a skill that's supposed to be in here that's missing. Um, but for the most part, it has everything you'd want to know and everything you'd want to see, and obviously it'll get updated in time. And once the game's released, I'm sure it'll be, as good as it can be. It's just a really nice tool, and I'm going to be using it today for this video, and without it, it wouldn't be possible. So shout outs to them. Let's get straight into it. So this is going to be my day one character for sure. At first, I was thinking Vex, mainly because she just looked overpowered, and I saw that she had a skill where status effect damage can crit, and I saw that, and I was like, bro, that just sounds like so stupid, and it is stupid, but the character itself didn't really look that fun to me. But Harlowe kind of fits the boxes of like looks really really strong, but also looks really really fun and something that I would enjoy. She is like basically the siren of this game, believe it or not. Obviously Vex is like supposed to be the siren, but Harlowe does what the siren is kind of known for in terms of like controlling the battlefield, and her entanglement feature is basically like ties that bind. So um, whenever you by default use an action skill on enemies, the enemies become entangled, and then they share 7% of the damage they take from guns and skills with all other enemies that are also entangled. And there's other ways to proc entanglement, and just effects like that are really cool. And the Cosmic Brilliance skill is really appealing to me, that being the flux generator. Basically, you throw down this device and it makes a giant dome, and then that dome does cryo damage over time, applies your entangle passive, and any allies inside of it gain overshields over time. And then every time you press your action skill while it's active, you can pick it up and toss it to a new location. Basically, you get to hold it for like a second and then you throw it somewhere else. You can't just like keep it in your pocket and reset it. You just keep throwing it around. And yeah, so I was going to be doing a build around this and show you guys what I'm talking about here. So there was two ways I was going to take my build, and I'm still not 100% set on which one, but I have an idea. I have an inclination towards one. There's one that I want to do more than the other, and that is revolving on the group study capstone. So basically what this does, and it's a little bit tricky with the wording and like actually thinking about it, but one of the devs was in a chat and they actually described this ability more, so that was actually really helpful and what actually pushed me towards using this now that I know how it actually works, at least as much as we can know before the game's actually out. So basically you use your action skill, and instead of it throwing out that generator that makes the giant dome, it spawns these companions that go on you, and they give you a buff. And then that generator that used to come out is around you instead. So you'll have like a smaller bubble that goes around you. Now, this is what I don't know, like how big is that bubble going to be? Is it going to be big enough to where like I can reliably get enemies in it and like actually have them in it, or is it going to be kind of like a Zarya bubble, like kind of small, and it's just there to still give you the buffs, but it's not going to affect enemies very well. That's what I don't know, and what could make this build change if we get more information on that, or like when we actually get to play and see how big the bubble is. But so with that out of the way, let me actually get into what the ability does. So you use your action skill and you get a buff that gives you gun damage, fire rate, and reload speed. These buffs also apply to your teammates as well, so you and your teammates get these buffs. Some of the best buffs like in the game. Um, and it's 25% gun damage, 20% fire rate, and 30% reload speed. But you can see if you're reading the text, it's per activation. That's because you can re-trigger the ability while it's active to reactivate it and stack the percentages. So if I activate it one time, you get what you see on screen. But if I activate it again, that doubles. Activate it again, that doubles. I don't know if there's going to be a max to how many times you can reactivate this, but I would assume that you can probably do it at least 3 times. So 75% gun damage, 60% fire rate, and 90% reload speed for you and your entire team sounds pretty freaking good, even if you're not playing with anybody else. This is the skill that I think people are sleeping on super hard. They're thinking like, oh yeah, Harlowe is gonna be like the ad clear machine. You're gonna like do mobbing really good, and you're gonna use creative bursts for boss damage. I'm gonna be honest. I think creative bursts is gonna be the ad clear option, and this is gonna be for bosses. This is one of the like biggest damage increases besides like things that interact strangely, kind of like fire in the Skagden from Borderlands 3. Other than things like that, this is one of like the biggest damage increase abilities you can have, like DPS wise, like damage and fire rate. As long as you're using guns, this is like amazing. I think you're going to be able to absolutely shred bosses, and that's why my build is going to revolve around this. Um, so with that out the way, basically what we're trying to get is anything that increases our damage, anything that can help us spread elements, because this skill right here, when we freeze enemies, we can pause the timer. So like anything that does duration, action skill duration, because every time we reactivate this, this is the one kicker, every time you reactivate this, the action skill drains faster and faster and faster. So it only lasts 25 seconds at base, which means, okay, in 25 seconds it's over, but every time you reactivate it, it drains 20% faster. So it's not going to last 25 seconds. It might last like 10 or 8 seconds, you know, depending on how many times you reactivate it. So trying to get duration and, you know, ways to freeze the timer so it can't drain are going to be very important. So with that out the way, let's actually get into putting some skills in here. So I think first off, one of the best skills we can get is momentum. This is a 5-point skill. Each point gives 5 crit damage for you and your allies. So we're already buffing our allies, which, you know, this does as well. So even more. So we get 25% crit damage for us and our allies. I think we put 5 points into there. Then right here we got neutron decay. This is whenever we irradiate an enemy. So whenever we apply the radiation status effect to an enemy, we gain gun damage. This at max stacks and max rank is 50% gun damage. It stacks 5 times and each point is 2% per stack, so 10% per point. So I put 5 points here. I get 50% gun damage. Then I think we'd probably want to do action at a distance because that's going to help us spread these statuses. And this is one area where I'm not exactly sure of how many points to put. Radiation is not something that you really need to apply like more than once, you know, because it doesn't really work like that. You're not trying to like constantly apply it. So we only really need this action at a distance to proc like one time. Because when this procs, everything that's entangled gets the status. So let me actually read what it does. So whenever we apply a status effect to an enemy, every enemy that is entangled also gets that status. So when this procs, everything that's entangled will get a status. So we only really need enough for this to be able to proc one time before everything dies, right? So I don't think we're going to need more than 1 point, because I should also mention my build's going to focus around doing radiation damage. Radiation and a bit of cryo. Cryo is the point where I'd maybe want more points in this so that I can, you know, proc it more so that I can ramp it up. But even then, you might only need 10%. So I'm just going to put 1 point into here just so that I can have a way to spread it, which is going to help this perk out a lot. And radiation is already really good at AoE, plus entanglement is good at AoE, and then this is going to spread the radiation so it's even better, right? Then I think what we're going to want to do is probably put points into mains hum, because this is a lot of damage. This is at max rank 36% gun damage based on overshield, and this is going to give us more overshield capacity. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points into here. 25% max shield capacity and 50% max overshield capacity. Now survivability seems kind of weird to put when I can get more damage, but this survivability is giving me damage because of this skill, like I said. So 36% gun damage right here. Then I think we go into, actually there's a lot of ways that you can go from here. I would think probably, let's actually think about this. Harlowe and her allies gain ricochet against entangled, double this chance with crits, crit damage. Yeah, I have an idea. So I think now we go excited state, 5 points. This is a 35% critical hit damage increase plus this 25%. It's a lot of crit damage. And then we go seize the day and we go make extraordinary. So what make extraordinary does is all of our skills gain a chance to critically hit. Every time we entangle an enemy, the effect stacks and adds more crit chance, up to 10 stacks. So we can't see the way that this is going to scale with points, but if I had to guess, the base crit chance is going to scale with points, but the additional per stack is not. I could be wrong and both could scale and this could be even better, but what I think this is going to do is basically be 20% crit chance. So you get a base 10%. Actually, hold on a minute. Yeah. You get a base 10% with 5 points because each point is going to give an extra 2 crit chance. So 1 point is 2 crit chance, 4, 6, up until it's at 10%. And then you can get 10 stacks of 1% for 20% every time you entangle something. The reason this sounds really good is entanglement is a skill. So when enemies are entangled and we shoot one enemy, all the other enemies that are also entangled take a portion of that damage as gun damage or skill damage. I mean, my bad. All those enemies that took skill damage or gun damage take the damage as skill damage. So with this allowing skills to crit, that means we can share the damage, and that shared damage can crit. So this is one of the few ways to buff entanglement damage outside of just giving skill damage. Because that means that basically 20% of the time, as long as this is stacked up, our entanglement is going to go through the crit damage modifiers that we have and do that much more damage. So you can easily kill stuff without even looking at it, right? So that's why I'm going to go excited state and make extraordinary. Now, after going the excited state and then make extraordinary, I think I would want to go into decoherence. So decoherence is you deal increased damage with all sources to enemies that are entangled, and if they're inside your flux generator, they take even more damage. So the enemies inside your flux generator part isn't super beneficial because with group study, I think the bubble is going to be really, really small and you might not be able to have enemies in it. But this is still a 25% bonus damage for every source to enemies that are entangled. So this also means that our entanglement procs themselves are going to do more damage because those enemies are entangled. And then after I go decoherence, I'm going to go latent charge. This is another skill that makes having overshield really good. And what this does is our guns, our melee attacks, and our action skill does more damage when we have overshield based on how much we have. So the action skill damage part and the melee attacks damage part doesn't really matter, but this is up to 50% of damage dealt is dealt as bonus damage, which is a lot for our guns. And if we decide to use a different action skill, then then the action skill damage obviously would matter, and then this is even better. So that's a very fat damage increase. And then I think we're going to want to go refraction next. So refraction is Harlowe and her allies gain ricochet chance against enemies that are entangled, and if you crit, then the chance is doubled. Ricochets do 50% reduced damage, which is still going to be a lot of damage if you're using a good gun. This is a 30% chance to ricochet, or 60% if you're critting, and it's, critting is going to be pretty easy to do, so we're just spreading that much more damage. Then I'm going to put a point in Annihilation. Annihilation is when the flux generator is active. If you or your allies are inside of it, it will throw a copy of their grenade, or if they don't have a grenade equipped, it'll just throw a base grenade. This is really strong with group study, because group study is going to put the bubble on us, and the bubble is going to follow us around. So you have to be inside the bubble. You have no other choice. So what's going to happen is I use my action skill with group study, which I'm going to actually select, so that's up here. I use that, and then me and my teammates walk around throwing out grenades for free, constantly. I don't know how often this is going to proc, but still, imagine if you have like a grenade that heals you, right? Like those the vampire grenades, or if you have like singularity grenades, or like a cryo grenade, and then it synergizes even more, or a radiation grenade. Like there's so many different kinds of grenades that could be really good with this, and you're just getting to use them for free, and your teammates as well. Just explosions everywhere, right? And then around basically, so the order of this could be different, because with group study you want absolute 0. So whenever you would get your group study, get absolute 0, and I'm going to put 2 points into here. So this is another skill that I'm going to actually have to like get my hands on with the game to decide how many points I'm going to want into this, because it depends on how often I'm actually able to freeze enemies, how many points I'm going to want in this, or if I even freeze enemies well enough at all for this to be good. Because what this is going to do is whenever we freeze an enemy, we gain a stack of 0 point, and for each stack our action skill duration is frozen for a certain amount of time, with 2 points into this being a second and a half. So obviously if we're not freezing enemies very often, we'd want more points in this so that when we do freeze enemies they get frozen for longer. But if we can freeze them pretty often, then you might only need a point in this. You might not even need 2 points. But you know what I mean? I just need to actually be able to play the game to see. And then the last 2 points, and this is another thing that like I could have done these points earlier, but I'm mainly just showing like a lot of the strong skills first, is confirmative reality. I'm going to put 2 points into this. Whenever you as Harlowe shoot an entangled enemy, you and all of your allies get a portion of their action skill cooldown restored. This is 1 second per shot. So I would have to assume that what this means is every time you deal an instance of damage with a bullet, which means if you're using a shotgun and it shoots, let's say, 12 pellets, you could restore 12 seconds of your action skill per shot on an entangled enemy. Now, that's how I would assume it works by how it's worded, but that would be really, really, really strong if it worked like that, so I'm not 100% sure. But even if you're using like an SMG, and an SMG can shoot 30 bullets in like 3 seconds possibly, you're getting that much cooldown. This might be all the cooldown you need, but this is another skill that I'm going to have to test. You might need more cooldown than this. This might even be too much, and you might be able to get away with 1 point, but yeah. Now with all those skills out of the way, let me get into the augments. So there were 3 augments that I was mainly thinking, and then I'll also talk about the other capstone I was thinking. So the capstone that I'm using for this build is group study. I already talked about that. But the augment is between 3. So it's either going to be, for me, Nuclear winter, perpetual engine, or coronal mass ejection, with blue giant being an interesting option, and I'll get into that. So, nuclear winter is the one I'm probably going to go with. This is whenever Harlowe and her allies are inside the flux generator's radius, they deal bonus cryo damage. Whenever Harlowe and her allies leave the flux generator's radius, they instead deal bonus radiation damage for a duration. And then the bonus part, which is what makes this even better, is whenever Harlowe inflicts a cryo or radiation status effect, the enemy becomes entangled. Being able to just entangle everything that you shoot just because your gun does cryo or radiation is really good, especially when you factor in that as long as your group study is active, you have a flux generator radius around you that you cannot leave, means that you and your team will be doing constant cryo damage for the duration of group study, which is why I want to freeze it so it lasts a really long time. And this is where a synergy comes in, because nuclear winter is giving me cryo damage, and this is whenever I freeze an enemy, I freeze the duration, so I don't even need to be using a cryo damage gun. I'm just getting cryo damage as a bonus on top of what I'm already using. Now, I did hear that I think it was like a licensed part from Maliwan or something with one of the new features, but basically you can be using, so Maliwan weapons have like a mechanic where you can swap between two different elements that the gun has, so like shock and cold, or I mean shock and cryo, or you know, heat and electric, stuff like that. Um, but I heard that there's like a licensed part where let's say my weapon, right? Because in this case this would be optimal, has radiation and cryo on it. If I'm in the radiation mode, I still do cryo, but at 10% of the effect, so I could still benefit from cryo, right? Like that could replace that functionality kind of, but I still think that you're gonna really like this augment because you and your teammates are just getting 25% bonus cryo, like 25% of damage dealt as bonus cryo. Like that is really hard to understate. Like it's hard to understate how good that is. That is like a very good buff. Um, Depending on how long you can make group study last. And even if group study doesn't last that long, when read this part, when you or your allies leave the radius, you get radiation damage instead for a duration. So when the ability ends, which would be you leaving the generator, now you get radiation damage. So I'm either going to have one or the other almost all the time, as long as I can get this ability back within 12 seconds, which is maybe or maybe not possible with confirmative reality, right? So, right, this damage increase on top of this damage increase just sounds really strong. The next option for an augment is Perpetual Engine. Now, Perpetual Engine is interesting. I think it'd be better with a dome, like with something that keeps the flux generator at its base functionality, where it's still like a big dome, because it would last longer probably. But what Perpetual Engine does is once you activate your flux generator, you get damage reduction and action skill duration for each enemy that was entangled when you activated it, and then every enemy you entangle after activating it also adds to that. So you get 7% damage reduction and 7% action skill duration per enemy. Now, this would still be good with group study because this would kind of offset the fact that the drain gets faster, because if the drain's going to get faster, then you just need to keep shooting enemies to keep entangling enemies. Now, this is where I get to a skill that's missing on this side right here. So there's a skill that's supposed to be in this like segment of the skill tree where doing a status effect inflicts the entanglement status, and it also gives 25% status chance. If you were to go Perpetual Engine, you would want that, because then it'd basically be like Nuclear Winter, the second part, where you just shoot enemies and they get entangled. So that with this would mean that you could keep your group study up for a really long time, as well as be insanely tanky, because 7% per enemy is a lot of damage reduction. And even if the enemy dies, I'm pretty sure you retain the buffs of this, so it's not like they need to be entangled and alive. So that's an interesting idea. And then the last one is coronal mass ejection. Enemies inside the flux generator's radius lose all elemental resistances, and Harlowe and allies inside of the flux generator gain 100% status effect chance. So this would also be good with that skill I was talking about, where inflicting statuses does entanglement, because you do a status every shot, as well as your teammates. But the main thing is that the enemies lose their resistances. So in Borderlands, like if an enemy has armor, for example, they might take only 70% normal damage from electricity. Whereas if they have shields, they might take like 150% extra damage from electricity. This means that they lose all resistances. So if you're doing bonus damage, like if you're using electric versus shields, you're still doing the bonus damage. But if you're using electric versus armor, and you would be doing less, you're now doing base, normal, 100% damage, which is really, really good, especially since in this game, resistances are probably going to matter more, because there's a whole stat screen dedicated to resistances now for your character. And the way that they're changing True Volt Hunter mode scaling, they're probably going to add some modifiers, or like enemies' resistances are just going to scale up higher in that mode. And that's what it did in previous Borderlands games as well, so it can only probably get harder. But this once again comes down to how big is the bubble around us going to be? Can we actually have enemies in it reliably or not? So it probably won't be this one. So you're pretty much with Nuclear Winter or Perpetual Engine, and I think Nuclear Winter is a no-brainer. Not only with the top text, but also the bottom text. Basically, if you're using Cryo or Radiation, which you should be using anyway because of like Absolute Zero and Neutron Decay, you know, all these things synergizing with Radiation or Cryo, and just Radiation being really good at AoE already, on top of her already good AoE skills and abilities. I just think that sounds really strong, as well as it just makes you and your teammates do that much more damage all the time. Even if this ability isn't active, because you get 12 seconds of instead radiation damage, right? So that's the build. Like I said, things are likely to change once I actually get experience. Like this might need more or less points. Same with this skill. Maybe I find out for some weird reason this doesn't allow entanglement procs to crit, which would be weird because it should, and then I would take points out of that, right? Maybe the frequency of grenades that this does is just not good at all, and it's not worth the point for whatever reason. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of different things that can change, but that's the build that I'm looking at going at the start. Nuclear Winter group study with these skills right here. But the second build I was thinking about is a variation of these skills, but using the Violent Horizon capstone with Unified Theory. Violent Horizon, it maintains how the flux generator normally works, where it keeps a big bubble around the generator, and then it has a retrigger effect, which makes a singularity that will pull in enemies to the generator, and passively the generator will shoot radiation projectiles at enemies nearby the bubble but still outside that will irradiate them and pull them in, so it helps keep enemies in. And then Unified Theory is the generator does more damage the more people are inside of it. So obviously keeping enemies in it and then doing more damage based on how many people are in it is really good. But this is going to come down to how much damage can the generator actually do, because we haven't been able to see that much. Sorry. Most of the gameplay I've seen of people actually showing the damage of it didn't show it for very long, and it was like at, you know, like level 20s and stuff where it's not going to do a ton of damage. So we're yet to like see the true potential of the damage of it, and like the ease of use of it when you're running through like encounters. So group study just seems like the easiest one to use and get value from, which is why I'm preferring to go for this build. And the other problem is to get Violent Horizon, a lot of these skills you don't really want. Like Gamma Ray Burst is good if you have a way of getting your shields back, which means that you'd want to go Distribution Function, which is when your action skill does damage, you restore shields, or if your shields are full, you get over shields, which is a good synergy. But you have to re-trigger your action skill every time you want this to proc, and that just sounds kind of annoying. And then critical funding is a good skill. I can't lie, that is a good skill. But it's just kind of getting past like a kind of almost a waste of 5 points because this is definitely worse, right? Handling is just definitely worse. Um, and then onto Blue Giant though, as I forgot about this. This is just the last little bit. This would be an interesting thing to try with group study because you might be able to make the radius bigger so that you can actually keep the enemies inside of it and actually have the bubble still be used for its damage while being able to move with it. It might be like a mobile bubble of death, which could be pretty interesting and pretty fun. Also, the hazards could be kind of fun as well. Um, every time you reactivate this to increase the buffs, you could just make a hazard where you were when you did it. It could be kind of a fun like run in and nuke, sort of thing because the bubble is on you. But you definitely want action skill damage for that. Um, there's a lot of ways you can go with this, but this is just kind of the build that I came up with. This was kind of more like a ramble video. I'm just really excited about this game, and I can't wait to play it and bring you guys some videos on it. Um, I might even be streaming when this game comes out, like streaming my run through the campaign. It's not all going to be in one session, obviously, but me and my friend are planning on playing through it together. So I might bring you guys a stream for that. Um, and if I do, I'll make sure to put out some kind of thing here on the YouTube, letting you guys know where I'm streaming at, if you'd be interested. But yeah, something like this is going to be what I run. And let me know what you guys are going to be running down in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one.